Alright, you're back with comedian David Boyle and I'm quitting alcohol. So I'm just going to pre-warn you, tonight is going to be all about Australian sport because this weekend is the biggest weekend of Australian sport for the year. It's the Cox Plate horse race, it's the AFL Grand Final and it's the Rugby League Grand Final. And that means absolutely nothing to anyone overseas. But to Australians, that means a lot of drinking, a lot of lost money, and a lot of fucking pills to get you through to Sunday. To kick off with, we'll start with the Cox Plate, which is Australia's premier weight for age horse race. Do you want more detail about horse racing? All right, there's two types of horse racing. There's handicaps and there's weight for age. The weight for age is the purest of all horse racing, because you are given a set weight for the age of your horse and the sex of your horse. So a 4-year-old mare, or a 5-year-old mare, I think it is, gets about 55 kilos from memory. A 2-year-old filly gets 49.5. A 5-year-old gelding, which is a male with no balls. A tranny horse, a horse that's in the middle of transitioning, or maybe it's already transitioned, it's got no fucking balls. I think they get about 58 kilograms. So that's weight for age, and handicaps, you just get some drunk cunt just guessing the weights. Like if a horse keeps winning, they just keep jacking its weight up. So eventually if you win too much, you get handicapped out of the handicap races, and you have to eventually only run in the weight for age horse races, which makes the weight for age the best horse races, because usually the best horses run in it. So it was the Cox Plate today. I didn't watch it. I don't know who ran in it. I haven't been betting. I don't know the horses. And is there anything more fucking boring than watching horse racing sober with no money on the line, with no skin in the game? All right, we'll move on to the next thing. The AFL Grand Final was today. Australia's national sport. Fuck anyone that thinks differently. No one cares about cricket in Australia. That's not our national sport. If you go to the cricket these days, there's more fucking Indians in the crowd than Australians. Australians don't care about cricket anymore. And if you look at the Australian cricket team, why would you? Australia's national sport is Australian rules football. The Irish listeners have a little bit of an idea because they have the Gaelic football. And there used to be crossover international matches between the Australians and the Irish, which usually ended up in fucking punch-ons. And the Irish used to beat us too, and they're not even professional athletes. The Australian rules football players, they're on like $1 million a year. The Irish Gaelic football players, I think they're bartenders, most of them. But anyway, Australian rules football is my favourite sport, and I've watched exactly 2 games of that this year. I watched the Sydney Swans lose the first game after the lockdowns, so I stopped watching football completely, and I watched today. And I can tell you this about Australian rules football, it fucking sucks now. It was a pretty good game tonight, I have to be honest. I hated both the teams, Geelong and fucking Richmond. Both of them I fucking hate. I don't hate their teams as much as I hate their supporters. So Richmond won, and I suppose out of the 2 teams that were playing, they were the one I wanted to win least. Their supporters are the worst. It was a good game, but the level these days is just not fucking up to scratch. These 2 teams 10 years ago would not have even made the finals, let alone playing in the fucking grand final. They wouldn't have made it. What happened was about, I think 10 years ago now, we had 16 AFL teams and they introduced 2 more for some fucking strange reason. But those 2 extra teams have like diluted the talent pool, and there's just not enough fucking talent to spread around. So the quality has gone just right down, because each team is 18 players on the field plus 4 on the bench. So 22 fucking players per team in a country that has like 24 million people, and only half the country plays AFL. It's like Victoria, Western Australia, a little bit of Sydney, and a little bit of Queensland, and Northern Territory, and Adelaide. So yeah, more than half the country actually, and Tasmania. But in Queensland and Sydney and that, it's not the biggest sport. So yeah, adding those 2 teams completely diluted the talent pool. So on every team now, there used to be like maybe 4 shit kickers, like guys that are just real good triers. Like, you know, people like me that slip through the cracks a little bit. But now there's like 6 or 7 players on every fucking team that wouldn't be playing 10 years ago. They just would not even be in the team. So the entire standard of football has completely dropped over the last decade, and it's almost unwatchable now. Like, tonight was alright because it was a close game, but if that was not a close game, the skill level's just under par. There's a player, Dustin Martin, who won his third Norm Smith medal. Norm Smith medal is best on ground in the grand final. He won his third one today, which is pretty good, and he really is a fucking gun. And one of my mates used to live with him. I don't know how it happened, but a mate of mine fell in with all the AFL players, like Dustin Martin, Dane Swan, all these fucking big players who are on like $25,000 a week. And my mate, who's like an electrician, sort of, he lays optical cable. I think he was on like maybe $1,100 a week. So he moves in with Dustin Martin and he's trying to keep up with all these AFL players. These AFL players are fucking minted. My mate is getting out credit cards. He's selling houses just to hang out with these dudes. I'm like, dude, just quit. You had a good run. Don't send yourself bankrupt. And the coke you're buying is shit too. He ended up having to move back home. Not Dustin Martin, my mate, obviously. So what's left? Tomorrow, the NRL Grand Final. The Rugby League Grand Final. Not to be confused with Rugby Union. Rugby League is really only popular in two countries. Like, I mean really popular. Australia and Papua New Guinea. That's it. Maybe Fiji as well. Everywhere else, it's their second or third sport. But that's more exciting to me because you've got Cameron Smith for the Melbourne Storm, who's probably the greatest rugby league player the world's ever seen. He's playing maybe his last game. I remember 15, 16 years ago him playing. I think he played in a grand final about 15 years ago. And he's playing in another one tomorrow against Penrith. And Penrith haven't been in a grand final since 2003. And 2003 was the first year I moved to Sydney. And Penrith won it. And I remember that grand final. I remember that team. I think it was like Craig Gower halfback. I think Luke Lewis was on the fucking wing back then. Luke Lewis spent the rest of his career in the fucking forwards. That was back when he was good looking. By the end of his career, he looked like he'd been hit with a baseball bat 19 times over the fucking head. Reece Wesser was number one, I think, back then. Preston Campbell. Who did they play that grand final? I think it was Sydney Roosters. If it was the Roosters, that was back in Brad Fittler's day. Anthony Minicello. Luke Ricketson. You know, these are players you can get behind. Who's playing now? Cameron Smith's still playing. That's who's playing. He's 37 years old and he's still the best player in the fucking league. Pretty impressive. Anyway, tonight was a Saturday night special. A little bit of Australian sports wrap up for the weekend. We've still got the game tomorrow. We've got the Melbourne Storm versus Penrith Panthers. I'm putting my money on the Melbourne Storm. I'll put down Cameron Smith to win the Clive Churchill medal this year. Send him out on a good note. Anyway, that's it for me tonight, and I'll see ya the fuck later.